Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Forever Young, the program that addresses issues that face those of us who are over 50, but has the mantra that age ain't nothing but a number because you are forever young. Again, I'm your host, David. I'm joined today again with my co-host, Dr. Sharon Mitchell. How you doing, Dr. Mitchell?
Great, David. And as always, it's a pleasure to be joining you again today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Now, those of you who regularly watch our show know that there's always a third person, and that is Jean Hendricks. She had another appointment, and so we gave her a pass this week, but she will be back next week on our next show. But today we're talking about something that we started last week, and we've been talking about COVID, coming out of the pandemic, still being in the pandemic now. But of course, we're opening up. There's been, all the governors in many states are, saying it's free to go back and do everything. And of course, the key has been vaccinations. And we have always had some discussions about the vaccination. So it's a topic of concern. And so, of course, we want our listeners to be completely informed. So we're lucky today to have another expert from the medical field to be here to talk to us today about the COVID and the vaccination and all those things that come along with it. And today our guest is Dr. Kimio Harris Williams. She's a board certified by the American Board of Pediatrics and a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And she's a native of New Orleans. Well, last week we had a doctor from New Orleans, so New Orleans has given us some great doctors. She's going to be here. She's an alum of Xavier University and biology and pre-med, and she continued her studies at Xavier and embarked upon a career in research in the Department of Pulmonary Critical Care at Louisiana State University School of Medicine. I'm not going to give you all the things about her. She's got a doctorate degree of medicine, of course, from Louisiana State University of Medicine. And she is here to share some important information about the vaccination and COVID, because again, we've always talked about those who have been most endangered, the adults, but there's always been that big question mark of how it affects our children. And so today, we hope that we'll be able to provide some answers for those questions today. So all that being said, I'd like to say, welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity.
No, it's exciting. You come from one of my favorite. I don't think anybody doesn't like New Orleans, and I always say, it's one of the fun places to go. And I always used to say, if you go to bad food, you just have bad luck,
Right.
So, but today we do want to talk about. I gave some information in the background, but can you give our audience a little bit more about your medical background and your history and what you would like them to know about your medical practice?
Okay, certainly. Thank you all again for having me today. Just before I start, I want to make sure that everyone knows that this conversation today is I'm not intended to give any medical treatment, any medical advice per se. So you should always contact your doctor or your healthcare provider for any medical decisions you make concerning your health. However, on today, I like to talk about the topic of COVID and some other things that we'll have discussion about. But as it relates to my medical background, as Mr. Linton said, I am a native of New Orleans. I trained in Louisiana, Xavier University undergrad, and LSU School of Medicine. I completed my pediatric residency training at LSU School of Medicine and Children's Hospital in New Orleans. But when I think about my medical background, I always go back to when I was a little girl in New Orleans going in to see my pediatrician. And when I went in, I said, "Oh, I think I want to be a doctor one day." And so I just filed that back. Didn't have any doctors in my family, and so it seemed like a little far-fetched dream to me. But when the Cosby Show came on, that really brought it back to
Yes.
surface. And I said to myself, I think I can do this. When I think about my background, it starts in, in the young ages, when when children see people that look like
Mhm.
them as doctors, people that are
Mhm.
progressing. So it's very important to be a mentor. I'll say that. And so my background, as of course I said earlier, undergrad at Xavier, LSU School of Medicine for my doctorate of medicine. And I continued on to practice medicine in both academics and clinical medicine, serving as assistant professor of medicine, family practice medicine, actually at Mercer School of Medicine in Georgia, and a faculty member at Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital Family Practice residency in Albany, Georgia. So I have some roots in Georgia, and so family there
Mhm.
as well. Currently, I am the founder, president, and CEO of KH Williams Enterprises, which is my company, which is an executive health entity focused on health advocacy, clinical practice, and medical consulting.
That's a very busy lady. That keeps you quite. And then we're so delighted to have you on the program today. I'm sure you're going to say, and I'd like to reiterate that this program is not designed to give you medical advice, but more of an education and information. And you should always check with your primary care professional for any specific advice. So, Dr. Mitchell, I guess you can start us off today.
Yes. And so we're so glad to hear about your background in medicine and certainly your involvement with children. We have had discussions in COVID and coronavirus as relates to adults. And now that we're looking at possibly opening schools and children returning to the classroom, we're getting a lot of feedback as it relates to children. So can you first educate us on what is COVID and what does it really mean in terms of the coronavirus? We like to make sure that our audience is clear on the subject at hand, and that is still a very, very important subject for our listeners. So if you could give us a little bit of background on that.
Certainly, certainly. And so, in addition to all of those other things I've been doing, I've been appointed by the Louisiana State Department of Health as a health ambassador. And so I've been educating people across the state of Louisiana and the country about COVID. And so COVID-19 is caused by a coronavirus called SARS-CoV-2, which also stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. It's a type of coronavirus that we've never seen before. You can get COVID through contact with another person who has the virus. It is predominantly a respiratory illness that can affect other organs. People with COVID-19 can have a wide range of symptoms reported, ranging from mild symptoms to severe symptoms. The symptoms usually appear 2 to 14 days after exposure to the virus, and common symptoms: fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headaches, loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion, runny nose, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So coronavirus is a family of viruses that actually can cause the common cold. And so we're not unfamiliar with coronavirus, but this strand of the SARS-CoV-2 is new, and this is why we call it a novel virus. And so because it is new in humans, since 2019, our body as humans have not seen it before, so we don't have antibodies to protect ourselves against the virus. So that's why we call it a novel virus. So the virus is an RNA virus. It enters the body via healthy cells in our body and attaches to certain types of receptors called uh, ACE2 or angiotensin converting enzyme 2. And these receptors are mostly seen in the heart, the intestines, the kidneys, and the lungs. And that's why we see symptoms related to those organs. So the virus enters our body and it replicates, and it causes inflammatory actions that can end to hyperinflammatory syndrome. It can affect other organs and cause organ dysfunction and death. So, with that being said, SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus 2, it needs us as a host to live and to be transmitted. And so, in order for this virus to live, it needs a host. And so that's what the virus is, kind of in a small nutshell. But that helps to kind of give some insight on what COVID or coronavirus really is.
I was super excited to find out that Sound Mind wanted to address this particular issue when it comes to our children and their feelings. I recommend as a therapist that it's so important for the parent, the guardian, the foster parent, whoever, to make sure that you're present. And I don't mean just in the room, but pay attention.
Hey Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
We are talking about pioneer women and women who are blazing the path for all of us.
I started this campaign with a prayer and a plan, and I just worked that plan. God saw fit to predestine me for this position. I'm honored that the community, they listened to what I had to say, and I'm excited. I'm excited to be a pioneer.
You said something that's really important, that these viruses, of the SARS viruses, have been around a while, and there's been known, it's just this particular strand is unknown to us, and its ability and its contagiousness is what makes it so dangerous. And so we thank you for really breaking down and for us. Got these vaccinations. We got the 3. We got we got Johnson. We got Moderna, and now we have Pfizer. So let's talk about the vaccines. What do vaccines actually do, especially in this case? And again, we know that, I read the other day that Moderna has asked for approval from the FDA, but just educate our listeners, our viewers, on what do the vaccines do?
So in general, vaccines help to prevent disease. It helps to facilitate the development of the body's defense against foreign entities that may attempt to invade the body. So it helps your body to recognize something that is invading you. So something foreign coming into your body, it builds a defense system against a foreign entity, for example, the virus, right? So we have number of childhood vaccines that has already eradicated a lot of childhood diseases like chickenpox, smallpox, those types of things, and that helps eliminate those entities, those foreign entities, throughout the entire community, and not just an individual person. So that herd immunity, I'm sure you've heard talked about. That's what vaccines do. It helps to prevent disease and facilitate the body's defense against foreign entities that try to invade the body.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. So Dr. Williams, you talk about the vaccines. And of course, when we talk about people of color, brown and Black people, we certainly have had some hesitancy as it relates to trusting vaccines. Is this something, can we actually trust the information that we're receiving about COVID-19 vaccine? And can we trust the vaccine itself as it relates to people of color?
So I'm really glad you asked that question. I work in this area daily as a part of research, and I feel so intimately connected to this topic of mistrust as it relates to the African American community with research and healthcare because of the unethical practices of the past that we've experienced. I think today this trust will have to be reestablished, and that will take time. But as far as trusting the information that we receive about the vaccine, I think what I would advise persons listening is to consider the source of your information and recommend that people of color look to trusted sources um, like the CDC, your local health department, your own personal healthcare provider. Look to trusted sources as it relates to um, information about the vaccines. I think those sources are trusted, and I think we can believe, I believe that those are some trusted sources, the CDC, your local health department, those are trusted sources. So the information is trusted depending on the source that you receive it from.
You know, that is so,
Absolutely.
yeah, that is so important because, you know, we have
Mhm.
I just have a practice, and it's part of human nature, I think, to always refer to what happened to someone else. You know, even when it comes to, you know, people say, well, you can't do this with your Social Security, or you can't do that because I talked to Joe and Joe said what happened to him,
Mhm.
not knowing that Joe's situation
Yeah,
may be yours.
different.
And so I think that's so important. And of course, the source. And, you know, I think the difference between then and now, of course, is we do have people of color involved in the research and all of those things that, you know, prior to we weren't a part of that process. So I think what you said is so valued. Now let's talk about, let's kind of shift a little bit to your area of expertise, which is with the children. Now, since we have all these trust issues as adults regarding COVID and the vaccines, now should we have those same issues for children? And I say that I think we've answered that a bit, but I think that, you know, at first they said children of certain ages weren't affected, and now that they're saying that children of, I think, just about of all ages are eligible for at least one of the three vaccines. How should we approach that with our children, especially with schools opening and schools? The governor here just said they're going to mandate. It's against the law of any school to mandate masks and all these things. So how do we approach our children, which is really, you know, touches home in a lot of different places?
Yes, so you know, I say we approach the children the same way we approach the conversation with ourselves. Gather your
Mhm.
information from trusted sources. I will admit, and I'm going to be completely transparent here. Um, Initially, when the vaccine was released, I had some apprehension about the vaccine for reasons of, you know, rapid development and production. But as a healthcare provider and a health advocate, I understand the fact that in order to eradicate COVID-19, we have to be vaccinated. That's the key to decreasing the spread and transmission of the virus. So at that point, I decided that I was going to do my own research and look into trusted entities to find out more about how does this vaccine work and what how was it developed and so through my research and learning about the vaccine and how it was developed and how it worked, that helped me to make a more informed and educated decision about one, myself becoming vaccinated, and the members in my family and my children. And so I would say, we have to be concerned, and we have to do our research, but we must trust the science, and we must do our research and look at those trusted sources. So when I did my research as it relates to how does a vaccine work, I don't know if you would like me to go into that a little more, but I can talk a little more about how that vaccine, specifically the Pfizer and Moderna, are mRNA vaccines. So they're messenger RNA vaccines. And that vaccine actually causes the body to produce the spike proteins that look like the spike protein that is on the coronavirus, and that allows your body to mount an immune response to those spike proteins. So the vaccine does not, which is one myth, does not inject COVID-19 into your body. That vaccine actually is very unstable. Once it enters the cells, it deteriorates, so it's gone. It does not interact with your DNA. It doesn't change your DNA. It only sends a message for your body to create the proteins of the spike protein. And so once your body creates those spike proteins, the body recognizes that as a foreign entity, and your immune system, which is supposed to, the defense cells start to generate. And so if your body is exposed to COVID-19 post-vaccination, post that 2 weeks after you're vaccinated, you should have developed an immune response to fight off the COVID-19 virus.
This is the story of a boy who is very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
That's great, because that's we need a layman's type of approach to this. and that was really not clinical, but layman's, so that we could understand that, because one of the myths is that, they're not going to, they could put the vaccine will put it in my system. And that's the number one. And so to dispel that myth is that's a big step forward, and that's why we're doing these series of programs to kind of debunk some of those myths.
And if I might add to what you just said about, the myth of putting the virus into your body, I think a lot of that myth came from that Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where people were thinking, which is they were not injecting syphilis into the men. They just did not receive the treatment that was available to them. So I think a lot of that misinformation is also a part of the hesitancy as it relates to and mistrust as to the vaccine.
That's almost worth repeating, but thank you. It is, because it is because, again, I'm over 50. That's all I'll say. But that's what we always thought.
And so am I.
So that it was that they gave them that, and that's what happened. And so that was not the case, but they just did not get the treatment. And
Right.
that's
Right.
such a big step
Mhm.
forward. Dr. Mitch, I think we have time for maybe one more question in this segment. So
Okay. Yes, I'll take that one then, David. Thank you. And I'm glad you talked about not changing our DNA also, because that's another one that we continue to hear. I was just talking to my nephew last week and he was like, you know, they're going to change your DNA. And I'm like, no, that's not true. So
Right.
I am so glad you got a medical expert that shares the knowledge. And it's so important to us that we get the right information so that we can be educated. Now, because we talked a little bit about adults, how can you educate us on children? Because we've had so many mixed messages on children as to whether they can get COVID, should they get the vaccine. And so I think the latest has been a specific age for children as it relates to vaccinations. Can you educate us a little bit about what the age group, and is there a particular reason why they selected those age groups?
Certainly. So
For the
yes, the CDC, yeah, for the vaccine. So the CDC actually recommends everyone 12 years or older should get the COVID-19 vaccine to help protect against COVID-19. And so the reason why we're doing 12 years or older, because those are where the studies have been done so far. They are planning to start studies in children 6 months and older in late 2021, 2022. So they may be recommending vaccinations for younger children sometime later on in late 2021, 2022, because those studies are being done currently. But at this time, it's 12 years and older for the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. And this is recommended because we know that widespread vaccination is a critical tool to help stop the pandemic. And children can be infected with COVID-19 and it can spread the virus. So getting a COVID-19 vaccine can help protect your child from getting COVID-19. Early information shows that the vaccines help to keep people from spreading COVID-19 to others. They can also help keep your child from getting seriously sick or ill if they do get COVID-19.
well,
Okay, thank you.
that's just so important to know. You know, of course, when just as the conversation gets really going, we're about to run out of time for this segment. But I would love if you have the time to just hold over and we'll do a part 2 for our audience for next week. Again, if you're just tuning in, we've been talking to Dr. Kenio Williams, a doctor from Louisiana and Georgia, and she's an expert pediatrician. Great knowledge that she shared with us about COVID and COVID-19 and the vaccinations. We talked in this segment a little bit about the myths. So when we resume our conversations, we want to talk a little bit more specifically about children and a little bit more about how this can affect children and other things that we need to talk to our grandparents and how they care for their youngsters in this COVID pandemic environment. Because we're not out of, you'd heard
Right.
terms like herd immunity, the doctor spoke about. So we're going to just say right now, I want to thank you for your time this time, and we will look forward to continuing this conversation. Dr. Mitchell, as always, it's a pleasure to share the platform with you today. And on behalf
Thank
of
you.
our executive producer, Dr. E. Dewey Smith, and our producer, and all of the people who are involved at Hope TV, we want to thank you on this show, Dr. Williams, and to you at home. Remember, life begins at 50. And so no matter what stage you are over that, you know, they said life used to begin at 40, but 50 is the new 40. So no
Right.
you know, age ain't nothing but a number, and you are forever young. I'm David C. Linton for Dr. Sharon Mitchell and our guests. We'll see you next time. Take care and God bless.